This week on Views from the Bucket podcast, we've got Cam Vieaux joining us, who is the father of Cam Vieaux, who actually made the major leagues, Anaheim Angels, got all the way up through all the different levels of baseball and of coaching. And we're going to talk about with Brian how coaching impacted Cam's development throughout the years. Let's go.
Welcome to the best seat in the house. It's the Views from the Bucket podcast, where we dive deep into the world of coaching youth baseball. Whether you're a seasoned coach or just starting out, we've got the bases covered. Join us as we bring you the best insights, strategies, and stories from the finest minds in the game. We've got it all right here. So grab a seat on the old bucket and knock it out of the park with Views from the Bucket.
Welcome back to the Views from the Bucket podcast. I'm really excited this week to have Cam Vieaux joining us. Brian is an entrepreneur within the mortgage and real estate industry and fintech in particular with FinLocker, but he's also a Amazon best-selling author now as of this year as well. And there's his book there. What's it called, Brian?
Yeah, we titled it "Rethink Everything You Know About Being a Next-Gen Loan Officer."
There you go. So lots of cool information in there. If you're in that industry and you're watching today, definitely pick up a copy of that book. And Brian also has a unique history with his own son. Obviously, this being Views from the Bucket, and we're talking about baseball coaching. Brian's son, Cam, made it all the way to the major leagues and is now actually pitching in Mexico. Just got his first win last night, I heard from Brian, so that's pretty cool. So Brian has been through it with coaches all the way from little tiny levels to probably T-ball level, right, Brian? And then all the way up to professional coaching. So what we really wanted to try to do with this episode is get a sense from Brian what kind of coaching experience Cam experienced throughout the years, including, if I'm not sure if you coach Brian, we'll get into that, but including coaching from dad, as well as professional coaching too. We're going to talk all about that today and talk about some of the experiences and some of the recommendations that Brian may have for coaches of things to do that he saw that worked great with Cam, and maybe some things that maybe he didn't love to see as well, because that happens too, as we know, in coaching. So Brian, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Chris, thanks for having me, man. I'm excited. I love the title of the show. I've sat on many a bucket over a lot of years.
That's right, exactly. And I think every coach can probably relate to sitting on the bucket. Best view in the house. That's what it is. But I do appreciate you doing this, and actually coming out of your business role and back into the baseball world to talk a little bit about this. So I appreciate that. But why don't you give us a little bit of your background in both business and in your baseball background?
Yeah, sure. So you kind of hit on this. I'm squarely in the middle of the mortgage finance space. I spent 30 plus years directly in the lending business, if you will, production, loan officer, managing production teams. And then the last 5 years, I've been on the technology provider side of housing finance with a startup. FinLocker is the name of the company and the product. And we're hyper focused on helping lenders reach, assist, engage, and nurture early journey first-time home buyers. Not too dissimilar than, a little leaguer getting nurtured into, high school baseball and maybe even beyond. So there's a lot of parallels to draw from.
Yeah, exactly. Now, were you a coach yourself for Cam, or did you?
So I coached both of my sons. Cam's our oldest. And I coached both of our sons in multiple sports. I spent more time coaching youth football and high school football, but I definitely coached baseball. When the kids were little, I did the T-ball stuff. A cool T-ball story that's relative today to Cam is his current girlfriend was his teammate on his T-ball team way back in the day. So she and her twin brother were on Cam's T-ball team together. So they all grew up together playing baseball. And she was actually literally playing baseball, I think, until she turned probably 8 or 9 and then jumped over to the softball side. But I coached T-ball, coached pitch. I was the rubber arm that they put out there and try to, I didn't get it until the like 2 or 3 games in that I was supposed to actually throw it so they could hit it. I wasn't trying to strike them out. I was too competitive, I guess. And then, Chris, what I realized with my oldest son in particular, with Cam, was, right around probably age 11, I realized that it had nothing to do with his talent. He and I were not meant to be coach player. We were, really going to have a better relationship as dad and son. He didn't take to my coaching all that well. So I guess I was smart enough to realize that, and I stepped away from coaching him entirely. And I did coach my middle son. We had a much different, dynamic. But I think that's one of the lessons and takeaways for anybody that's watching and listening, and you're maybe coaching your own kid. You may have the best intentions in your heart and in your mind, but sometimes that dynamic just isn't going to work. And I'm of the mindset that you shouldn't try to force it, because that I've seen where that has been forced, and more often than not, it leads to the kid usually saying, I don't even like this game anymore. And in reality, it's probably not the game itself. It's probably they want their dad to be their dad, not their dad to be their coach. And so there's some, inner studying that we all have to do in that process, I think.
What I love about that is talking about the difference between coaching and being a dad. And obviously you had a moment there where you realized that's time to make that change. How much do you believe from that point on coaching had to do with Cam's rise in baseball?
A ton, but this might be a little counterintuitive. So, Cam's a left-hander, throws left, bats left. And if you think about it, back to everybody's little league experience, especially as a coach, what do you do with, anybody on your team that's left-handed? You basically almost force them into being a pitcher. So he had no desire to be a pitcher ever when he was young. He wanted to be a catcher. And so the trade-off with him is when with his younger coaches was, hey, we'll let you catch as a lefty, which most people wouldn't do, but in exchange, you're going to pitch too, right? So the early part of it was having some flexibility as a coach, to let the kid kind of explore other roles, other positions. And even if you knew and felt like you knew what was best for him, kind of gave him some flexibility. But really it was Cam's experience in football. If we really fast forward the clock, because he was a late bloomer. He never made All-State here in Michigan in baseball. He didn't, he was not heavily recruited out of high school for baseball. He ended up at Michigan State, Division I in the Big Ten, of course, but as a walk-on. And so he was a late bloomer in a lot of ways, but it was his senior year high school football season. I think that was the catalyst for what changed for him. And it was how, his football coaches kind of dealt with him. And in particular, we were a high school that was a ground and pound. We ran the ball and kept running it until, we couldn't run it anymore. He played wide receiver. So I always talked about him as, he was a great extended lineman because he was out there stalk blocking on almost every play. But it was our high school state semifinal game. And we came up against a team that was equally proficient at running, but even more proficient at stopping the run. And so all of a sudden we had to do something completely different. We had to fling the thing around. We had to throw the ball like crazy. And he had a breakout game, like 12 receptions, 3 touchdowns. And that gave him like an unbelievable amount of confidence. He played very well that game, obviously, to the point where at least one school was at least talking to him about football, even though that was never going to be an option. But he took the confidence from that season where he also grew some, but coaches poured kind of confidence into him, so that when we got to the 13th game of the season, semifinals, and we hadn't been throwing the ball, he had more than enough confidence in his ability because his coaches had poured it into him that he could perform on that day on that field. And so, I would tell coaches that are watching and listening that don't underestimate how impactful your coaching and what you pour into your players is. And it may not be impactful in the particular sport you're coaching. It could impact a different sport. And in most cases, it's probably going to impact some other facet of that player's life outside of sports altogether. And so I think that's kind of what I would impart on our audience, is that your role as a coach at every level is so important to your players' maturation and really who they are as a person.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I think a lot of coaches. I teach the coaching courses in Ontario, Canada, and with Baseball Ontario, and to help certify coaches for the year. And one of the things that always comes up in those courses is give me drills, give me drills, give me drills. Like, that's all we hear. Give me drills. You got to be teaching me more drills. And while that's okay and that's great, and you do need to know how to do the drills to help your players develop, a lot of players are, they're at side sessions at different facilities. They're doing different things. They're working with mom and dad at home. They're out there. So those are great, but they're getting their reps elsewhere. What you brought up is really key, and I try to harp on this as well in those courses, is it's that mental thing that you can give those kids, the confidence to. Baseball's a game of failure in particular, right? So like, you're gonna have to. There's coach pitch, as you brought up, and coach pitch you're gonna hit 800, right? Then you're gonna go to, and I brought this up in a previous episode, but then you're gonna go to like 10U, 11U, wherever it is that you start facing, kid pitchers. You get hit by the ball. You're not gonna bat 800. There's all of that, right? So it's huge, this mental side that coaches can bring. And as you even said, and I thought that was brilliant, it may help another sport as well, right? So yeah, that's huge. Is there one thing that you can look back on with Cam's history and say, something that happened within his baseball career that you go, wow, that came from coaching, that came from somebody helping him out?
Yeah. So I'm going to fast forward to his what we call his cup of coffee, right? He had 43 days up in the big leagues with the Pittsburgh Pirates. And there was a game that he pitched in, and it was a blowout game. We were losing by, I don't know, 8 or 10 runs, whatever it was. But it was too early in the game to go to a position player. And so Cam came in from the bullpen. It was, I want to say, the 8th inning maybe. And didn't go that well at all. I mean, the game was already out of question, so that it wasn't about winning or losing for the team. But he had arguably, maybe one of his worst innings ever as a pitcher at any level, and he sadly had to do it on the biggest stage of all. But the other side of it that was interesting is he was on that mound for, I think it was 56 pitches in that inning, which at any level, most coaches would never dream of that for their player, right? They wouldn't do that. We were at the game. My wife and I were at the game. It was tough, man. It was a really rough outing to watch. And, your immediate reaction as a parent is, why is this coach doing this? Why is he still out there? And in my mind, I was already processing where I thought Cam's head was going to be throughout this whole thing. And in my mind, I was thinking to myself, even as it was going on, he would be more angry at his coach if he came out and took him out and didn't let him clean up this mess, right?
Yeah.
And so you can imagine the texts that were coming into me in real time from people of all kinds of backgrounds and friends and whatever. I can't believe this, blah, 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 blah. And so the game ended. We're talking to Cam afterwards, and he just said, "Hey, man, I kind of created it. It wasn't coach's job to clean it up for me. I made the mess. I wanted to clean it up." And so the next day he was interviewed, by the local sports team, and they were pretty critical of the manager. And Cam, Cam said, he basically said, he's like, this, I would have been more, he told this to the reporter. He's like, I would have been more angry with Shelty if he wouldn't let me clean up my mess that I started. That was on me. I needed to step up for my team at that time. So it was that moment where I'm like, okay, all of the years of different coaches kind of pouring into him came out in that one moment, which was, again, a moment that was arguably the worst moment for him, but all the best came out of that, which was super cool. I was super proud of him for handling that way. And I was super grateful for every coach that had a role in his life to that date, including, Shelton, the manager of the Pirates, because that'll be a moment that both Cam and Shelty will never forget for different reasons. And I think they're both better for it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an amazing example of how coaches can really have an impact over the years on the mental approach to the game as well. Especially this game, as we said, it's a game of failure, so you have to really get used to that. And we see that with our young players now. I'm coaching 12U travel ball, and they'll get so upset just giving up a single, and you have to really teach them. That's nothing. I mean, you even got out of that inning, right? So it's sitting them down and really making sure they understand that this is what this game is, right? And it's a hard game to get as far as Cam did. So now, from your perspective, then, what's your advice to parents who are going through this? There's a certain level of where parents need to kind of stay out of the coach's way, right? And it doesn't happen all that often. In fact, parents try to meddle in all the time. There'll be things where they reverse what we've taught them. There'll be, berating them in the car after the game. Things like that really can take every little piece that you just put back into them confidence-wise and rip it right back out. What's your advice? How did you handle that throughout the years with Cam?
Probably not as well as I could have or should have. Of course, in retrospect, it's easier to kind of be a Monday morning quarterback in that respect. First of all, one of the things I'll point out, and it's probably very obvious, college athletics today is really challenged by all that's going on with the transfer portal and NIL and all that, right? One of the parallels I like to kind of compare like travel sports to is this whole concept of transfer portal, because the transfer portal existed in travel ball well before it existed in college athletics, right? Because how many kids do we see go from team to team to team to team in travel ball? And less about the kid making the choice, but more about the parent deciding this isn't the right team or right coach for Billy, right? And so to me, I think one of the things that I think about in travel, and what we didn't, Cam didn't move around a lot. He didn't play on like the highest level travel teams. But we also encouraged as a family, and even when I coached, we always encouraged our kids to play multiple sports. So he was a seasonal athlete, right? So he, basically at the end of July, baseball always ended for him, and he started football. And football went right into basketball. And then maybe in January or February, we started to pick up a baseball and get ready for springtime. So he wasn't in the sport all the time. And he definitely was not a guy that was in, doing a ton of, high level one-on-one training that is more, common today. And I'm not knocking that at all. I actually owned a training facility for a while. But I do think there's value in kids playing multiple sports and having multiple experiences. I think there's a ton of value in kids playing sports that they fail at and learning how to fail and fail with, fail humbly, if you will. I think I don't know. I think we've gotten to this place with young people and young youth sports, especially, where there's so much pressure now on coaches to have results, and those results are seemingly only measured by how many tournament trophies you have, and I'd love to see where we really got more into the development, both physical and mental development of young athletes. And it's probably less than 0.5%, and maybe it's even less than that are going to go on to play collegiately, let alone at a level beyond college. And so what are we really preparing them for? It's life.
Absolutely. It's definitely life. And And it's funny because you see some organizations that are all about winning. They're all about, I mean, especially at this level that I'm at right now at 12U. We'll get into a tournament. You won't believe some of the things coaches are saying and doing, right? And all for the win. And then you get the organizations that worry about development, that worry about both. I mean, really, you do have to compete. If you're playing travel ball, you've got to be able to compete. But you use that as a lesson mentally, right? And how to develop them as leaders and people, as they grow up, right? So it's one of those things where you really do have to be really careful with the message about winning versus the message about winning in life and becoming leaders and becoming good citizens and that sort of thing, right? So yeah, that's a huge point you make there. Let's shift to the players that might be watching this, and hopefully there are some players watching this. They probably won't be 12, but they'll be older. And what would your advice be about, especially to the players where they think coaching didn't make a difference? So you got your superstar players out there who think, I'm already really good at this sport. Coaching doesn't do anything for me. I'll just ignore my coaches. What's your message to them from your experience as a dad and from Cam's experience as your son?
Yeah, so I'll take it outside of sport. Most of you as athletes are not going to play your sport beyond probably high school. The vast majority of you are not going to play your sport beyond high school. And so, you may be one of the best right now, and maybe the coach you have can't teach you how to get better at what you do, but you can learn and be coached on being coachable, because being coachable is what's going to pay off in your life when you get into post athletics and post, college, and you're into the real world, if you will. Being coachable is a skill, and it's a skill that can be learned, and it's a skill that can be improved on. I'm 56 years old, and I learn and I try to learn and be coachable every day in my business and in my profession. And so I think for all of you that are listening as athletes, you're on a team, you have coaches who are mentors by extension. There's something they can teach you. Hopefully it has to do with the game you're playing and the particular, maybe the position, but there's also things they can teach you beyond the game. And I would just, I would go into everything you do be a coachable athlete, knowing that is a skill you need in your later life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think coachability is a huge thing. I've seen teams cut kids that are great with skill, but they aren't coachable. And so because of that, we don't need you here, right? I mean, people underestimate the importance of coachability for sure. I think of parents especially, right? So yeah. So
I remember making decisions on players based on their parents.
Yep. Yeah. A parent cut. Yeah. Those things happen, right? I mean, they do. You see them on the sidelines of tryouts and you go, wow, okay, we know this is going to be a problem, right? And it's unfortunate for the kid who maybe would have been great on the team, but the parent's just so meddling that you can't do anything about it. You can't take them. So, those are all great points, Brian, and thank you for that. From a perspective of the higher levels that Cam got to, is there anything that he was taught from a coach at a higher level that you go, wow, if youth coaches knew and taught this, athletes would be better off much sooner?
Talk about his freshman year at Michigan State, where he was redshirted. And, so you think about any kid who's used to being one of, if not the best player on your team and playing just about every inning of every game, transitioning into an experience where day one, you're never going to play in a game that season, right? And so Mark Vandermeed was his pitching coach at Michigan State at the time, and really did a really good job of using Cam's redshirt season. First, he was able to convince Cam that the physical nature of the sport at that level is going to require him to be physically stronger. So Cam had to fall in love with the weight room and really get after it and build his body in a different way than he's ever done before. But then Coach Vandermeed was really good about the mental side of the game and even though Cam was redshirted, spending time with him and all of his pitchers on the mental side of the game, including how to watch a game when you're not the pitcher, right? And study the game and study the opponent and their tendencies and trends. So there was definitely that piece. And then when he got into pro ball after being drafted, learning, you go from a college atmosphere and a college coaching staff that spend a ton of time with you and really are in the developmental business. And then you go into the pro level, and you would think intuitively, all of us, I think, would think intuitively that there'd be more focus and more attention, but you have a lot more independence. And so when he got into the Pirates organization, he had some of the folks within the minor league instructional group that really taught the guys what independence meant, but how independence also meant responsibility. And it was your responsibility as a professional athlete to take care of your body, take care of your nutrition, take care of your rest, do the proper arm care. You weren't going to get babysat through that experience. So he really had to learn like independent responsibility, which was pretty cool as well.
Yeah, that's interesting how the difference happens, right? You got all the coaches that are on top of it at college level and below, obviously, and then more so your responsibility as the player beyond that. That's an interesting perspective, and you mentioned playing time to an extent there as well, and we see it obviously being in Canada too. We don't have as many baseball opportunities as the U.S. does. That being said, when you make an elite team here, there's often situations where on that team, even though they're traveling to the States and there's a ton of games, you still might not play very often, right? And you might be the person that's just kind of developing on the side right now. And I've seen a number of players go back to their local leagues and things like that because of playing time issues in those elite levels. Is that the right decision? Like, your message to parents there, is it the right decision to say, okay, your kid made an elite team, they didn't get playing time, you're mad about it, you're sort of convincing them to go back down. Is that the right move, or should they be staying elite and getting the coaching that they get there?
That's a really tough question, because with elite, you have a financial impact that oftentimes goes with that, right? The family's going to have a financial commitment to elite level baseball. And it's not just the cost of the team. It's now you got some travel and expenses for all that. And so to a degree, I can see where, balancing, playing time versus the expense of this, what is the trade-off? I think it really comes down to, what does the kid want? What are they trying to get out of this? If they love the game and it's really just about playing the game, then maybe I would say go play at a level where you can play as often as you want to play. But understand, you're not going to be playing at this elite level. If you're a player that has desires beyond whatever that current level is, you should always be leveling up. So you should, I would tell players to be challenged themselves, to go find teams where you're fighting for that 12th spot, for that pinch hit opportunity in the 7th inning. That's where you will level up. And again, taking this beyond athletics and into real life, you go into the business world and, you don't get things your way. You're just going to leave and go find another company to work for because you weren't the best and you weren't getting the best assignments. It all comes back to, what are you trying to do? And again, less than 0.5% of players are going to go to a level that truly is next level. So what is it that you're trying to achieve at this point in life? And if it's pure enjoyment from playing the game, I would encourage you to find a place where you can play the game and play it as often as you want, or not as, or as infrequent as you want.
Yeah, absolutely. What does Belichick say? If you don't like it, do something about it. Right? And that may be what it is for those players, is go out and go and get it. It's the same as you just said in business world and business life. Life in general, there's people that will stay at a sort of a lower level in their companies, introductory levels, and never have that ambition to move up, and they're fine with the playing time they're getting, essentially. There's others that want to become VP and executive vice president. Well, guess what? You don't just get made that. You don't get that playing time just handed to you. You have to actually go out and earn it, right? So same thing in the business life. This has been awesome, Brian. I really appreciate this. I know you're taking time out of your business schedule, and you're probably your book signings and everything else that you're doing too here, but I really appreciate it. Any final advice you would give to parents or players or even coaches watching this? Coaches will be the main audience for this, to help their players get to that next level, to the level that Cam got.
Yeah, I would. The resources available today to all of us, regardless of what we're trying to do, are amazing, right? We can literally YouTube anything. We can subscribe to podcasts like yours and learn that way. I would encourage young parents, especially that their kids are maybe just getting started in any kind of level, to really think about what is most likely going to be the outcome of 18 years, 19-year-olds that are starting at T-ball. Don't too many of us, think, oh, my kid's going to be the best, this, that, and everything. Nothing wrong with that. That's natural parenting. But I think you have to have the realistic expectation that they're not going to be that thing in that sport. And so I just say to parents, I'm like, especially today, let the kid have an opportunity to try and learn as much about every sport and non-sport as they desire. They're going to naturally figure out what they like to do the most, and most times I think that ends up being what they're best at too, by the way. I think the physical side, I get a little worried about how much specialized training is happening today at young ages, and I don't think that's good for development of a young body. And so, again, I think that's where you get the benefit of multiple sports. But mostly it's the mental side. I think we have societal problems around mental health, and I don't think it helps with some of the pressures that adults put on young kids, and really young kids, honestly. And so I think we just have to be more conscious around the whole child, if you will, not just the athlete that's there.
That's fantastic advice and great words to finish this off. And really, that's a combination of responsibility too, not just the coaches, but also the parents and even the player as they get older, right? The player needs to know where their limit is to this, mentally especially. So, Brian, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Congratulations to Cam and his success. Obviously, that's huge for a parent anytime you can see one of your children make the major leagues. And even though the outing didn't go great, at least he was out there, right? And
first one was good. I'll leave you with this. His very first batter, he struck out Evan Longoria, so that was pretty cool.
Oh, that's pretty awesome. That's awesome. And was it in Pittsburgh?
Yeah.
Oh, even better, because it's one of the most beautiful stadiums out there, right? So what a view from Pittsburgh. So thank you again for this. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris. Enjoyed it.
Thank you. For Brian Vieaux, I'm Chris Baker. Thanks for joining us on Views from the Bucket. We'll be back with you next time. Make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks for being here on this episode of Views from the Bucket. We hope you've gained some valuable curveballs of wisdom and that they'll help you on your coaching journey. Remember, the diamond is where we shape not just players, but young lives. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show so that we can continue bringing you the best in the world of coaching. And if you have a topic you'd like us to cover or a guest you'd love to hear from, drop us a line. We're all about helping you become the best coach you can be. Until next time, keep that bucket of knowledge and passion overflowing, and keep inspiring young ball players to be the leaders of the future. Play ball.